Welcome to this lesson where I'm going to very briefly talk about a special type of IAM role, and that's service-linked roles. Now luckily there isn't a great deal of difference between service-linked roles and IAM roles. They're just used in a very specific set of situations. So let's jump in and get started. So simply put, a service-linked role is an IAM role linked to a specific AWS service. They provide a set of permissions which is predefined by a service. So they provide permissions that a single AWS service needs to interact with other AWS services on your behalf. Now, service-linked roles might be created by the service itself, or the service might allow you to create the role during the setup process of that service, or service-linked roles might also get created within IAM. Now, the key difference between service-linked roles and normal roles is that you can't delete a service-linked role until it's no longer required, and that means that it's no longer used within that AWS service. So that's the one key difference. Now, in terms of permissions that you need to create a service-linked role, this is an example of a policy which allows you to create a service-linked role. So you'll notice a few key elements of this. So in terms of the top statement, it's an allow statement. The action is IAM create a service-linked role. And then for resource, it has this service-name.amazonaws.com. Now, the important thing here is do not try to guess this because different services express this in different ways. The formatting is different, and you're not going to be able to guess this by knowing the name of the service. I've included a link which contains an overview of these attached to this lesson. But the key thing is the format can differ and it is case sensitive. So when you're creating this type of policy to give somebody the ability to create service-linked roles, you have to be careful about making sure you do not guess this element of a statement. Now, another important consideration with service-linked roles is that of role separation. So when I talk about role separation, I'm not using it in a technical sense. I'm talking about it in a job role sense. So role separation is where you might give one group of people the ability to create roles and another group of people the ability to use them. So in this case, we might want to give Bob, who's one of our users, the ability to use a service-linked role with an AWS service. So that's using this architecture. So being able to take a service-linked role and assign it to a service. And if you wanted to give Bob the ability to use a pre-existing role with a service but not create that role or edit that role, then you need to provide Bob with the pass role permissions. So this is an example. This allows Bob to pass an existing role into an AWS service. It's an example of role separation. It means that Bob could configure a service with a role which has already been created by a member of the security team. He'd just need this list role and pass role permissions on that specific role. Now, this is the same type of architecture as when you use a pre-created role, for example, with a CloudFormation stack. You might not have done this lesson yet, but by default, when you're creating a CloudFormation stack, CloudFormation uses the permissions of your identity to interact with AWS, which means not only do you need permissions to create a stack, but you also need permissions to create the resources that that stack creates. So that's the default method. But what you can do is give, for example, a user Bob the ability to pass a role into CloudFormation. That role could have permissions which exceed those which Bob directly has. So a role that Bob uses could have the ability to create AWS resources where Bob does not. So Bob might have access to create a stack and to pass in a role, but this role is what provides CloudFormation with the permissions it needs to interact with AWS. So pass role is a method inside AWS which gives you the ability to implement role separation, and it's something which you can also use with service-linked roles. This is something I just wanted to reiterate so that you understand that passing a role is a very important AWS security architecture. Now that is everything I wanted to cover in this very brief lesson. It's really just an extension of what you've already learned about IAM roles, and it's something that you're going to be using in demo lessons elsewhere in the course. For now, I just want you to be aware of how service-linked roles are different than normal roles and how the pass role architecture works. But with that being said, that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. So go ahead and complete the video, and when you're ready, I'll look forward to you joining me in the next.